So we were tasked with thinking about bridging the gender gap in research, leadership, evidence, experience, and action. And we were sort of given a few prompts to think about. And so I just wanted to open it to the panel and see if you had any initial thoughts before we sort of go through the list of things we were tasked to think about, what you reflected on, what you thought you would bring to here, and your past experiences in dealing with research leadership.
I guess it's just to reflect on where I'm coming from. When I got this invitation, I thought, well, what perspective are you looking for in terms of this? And so I have a kind of twofold perspective of being based at the University of Glasgow, but liaising with the University of Cape Town and being part of an African network of researchers, mostly female. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of the difficulties of being both a Global South scholar working in the North and then in turn liaising with Global South scholars in higher education institutions which are precarious, under-resourced, mostly with women academics who are facing particular challenges. So I've got my own perspective on that and then also continuing to work in those spaces. So that's where I'm coming from. I thought that would be useful to know.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm delighted to be here. And I think when I got the list of prompts and questions from Josephine, my reflection was that I've been very blessed throughout my career as an academic in that I came into academia into a supportive network of very, very strong women who have mentored me throughout my career and supported me to get to where I am today. And I'm a Global North scholar working mainly in the Global North, but I do work also with the Global South, and I've done that over the past 10 years. And I think for me, the important thing that has driven me as I've moved through my career is that sharing, not to be the queen bee, because that is really, really important. We need to build the networks as we're doing here today, but also support women and promote them. And one of the things that I'm doing at the moment that I'll speak more about as we move through this panel, and I'm delighted as I've got a small amount of money from the British Academy to run an early career writing mentoring program with early career academics, social scientists in Kenya. And we've got 2 years to work with these early career social scientists to give them the skills, the confidence to not only move forward on the international arena, but also then to support colleagues within their universities. Now, this isn't a gendered or a women-only scheme. It is open, but I'm delighted to say that half of our participants are women, which was lovely to see them coming forward. And we had a lot of people applying for the programme, but to see they were the standard and to promote them on that. So I can speak more about that later.
Thank you. I'll be talking more about my role as a woman in academia in the African context, in the Nigerian context. And one of the things I'll be emphasizing is the cultural and structural frame that needs to be, improved on or changed totally in order to encourage women in academia. Thank you.
Well, so I'd like to go through sort of our set of questions and ask each of you to sort of reflect on that and what you thought about. And just to say, like you all, when I asked about these sets of questions to think about, I started looking up statistics in the UK and at University of Glasgow and with some of my colleagues' institutions in East Africa to look at gender disparities and differences and where things were. Well, I'm sure more of it will come up when we're talking about sort of the structural issues, but I think that having networks like this is really valuable, as well as thinking about how to bring men into the fold as well, and past experience working on gender issues, which on women's empowerment issues in East Africa in particular, was trying to contend with the men who felt left behind. There's a lot you could say about that. However, that one of the things is that we result in our research was the need to bring men into the fold, because women cannot be supported at institutions, in particular, that are dominated by men, without their support. Right. So that was a big thing to think about. So I'm going to ask you guys about that. You guys, you wonderful ladies, about that as we go on. So the first question was, what does the latest data on your own institutional evidence tell us about the current state of gender balance in research leadership roles?
Of course, we know the statistics. There is a skewness towards men in academia. And one of the things I've experienced, not I personally, but in my institution, we have, especially in the area of STEM, there's a faculty, it's been there for well over 40 years, but they got the first female professor this year. Yeah. So, but in humanities, it's better. But when you talk about sciences, it could be quite a problem. So with that kind of thing, you wonder what's going to happen. So let me say, it's the Faculty of Technology. And in that faculty, you have engineering and technology, food science and tech. And this professor is coming from food science and tech. So which means engineering does not have a female professor as of the last time that we had an EMP program. So I don't know, it's a big problem. And I'll talk more about it when we get to the issue of structure. Thank you.
So when I thought about that question, I went to my own experience, and being from the faculty of the School of Social Sciences, and also working in the School of Health and Wellbeing, I've continued after my start being surrounded by very, very powerful, very, very influential and very, very empowering female academics to actually come into a situation within the University of Glasgow where I encountered more of the same. So within the School of Health and Wellbeing, of which I was Deputy Director for a couple of years, since its inception, it has always had an entirely female leadership, which is absolutely excellent. The director and the two deputy directors have always been female, and that has moved on over the 10 or so years, probably 15 now that the school has been in existence. And then moving to the School of Social Scientists, again, we have had strong female leadership in our school. And we've recently reshaped into an overarching school with 3 divisions underneath it and then subject group leads. And I would say still within that leadership, the divisional leads, 2 out of 3 are women, and at the divisional level and the subject level, we have strong female leadership representation. So I think that I completely agree that looking at different areas, particularly STEM areas, that can be very, very different. Male leadership, but then also some examples of queen bee female leadership, which can actually be even more counterproductive sometimes than male leadership.
I was interested in kind of research grant leadership because I've been struggling a lot with kind of north-south inequalities in terms of the huge amount of resources that the UK and Europe have in comparison to, for instance, South Africa, where I'm from, and trying to create kind of opportunities for Global South colleagues of mine to benefit from the leadership opportunities of research grants. So I looked up the figure and I found out that, for instance, Horizon Europe, about 1/3 of the leads on that are women. 1/3 of that are women. So now where's the leadership in terms of research grant opportunities? So for me, that's always a challenge, and a lot of these funding calls have a kind of inequality built into it in terms of domination of northern knowledges. So for me, that's a real issue, and that's an obstacle because it's coming from these broader European policies about what's important research. And so we're talking about here epistemological blindness, not acknowledging the knowledges of the South, specifically related to gender-related issues, and also epistemological colonialism, taking over that knowledge because it's dominated by particular narratives on what policy should focus on. That's from my experience in terms of the types of research that I'm doing in terms of social science research.
So the next question was, can you share personal experience where gender dynamics influence leadership opportunities, positively or negatively, and how you navigated it?
My whole career, and I'm looking maybe 20 years of being in leadership, and I've taken a lot of leadership roles, and I have encountered the queen bee in every situation, every scenario. And so I don't have a positive story, unfortunately. I have a very negative one. Every single mentor that I've come across that has supported me, shared their knowledge, encouraged me, helped me, given me the informal inside track on things, encouraged me for promotion, have all been males in a female-dominated setting, because of social science, especially I'm in criminology, it's dominated by females. And all my toxic experiences, all my subversions, all the backstabbing, all the undermining and the gossiping, unfortunately, have been women. It's been a terrible story, and it created a toxic environment for me, and that's why I left South Africa, because of this. Women in leadership at various levels have been undermining me all along. And now, why is that? Competition, fighting for resources, not wanting to share across. So no matter what kind of policies you have in place, if you don't have that informal collegiality, you create a toxic space. And I've had that firsthand. So a lot of queen bees. And the positive story is that, of course, only I can change that by trying to be a positive role model and sharing my knowledge and not trying to compete with female colleagues.
When I initially read that question, I thought, well, I don't know that I've got an awful lot to say about that, because, again, I've had this quite supportive experience. But just listening to Julie, I did have one experience where I was trying to move through the Glasgow experience. I got continual knockbacks, and that was from a queen bee here in Glasgow. But luckily I had my support network of other strong women who definitely were anything but queen bees. But one thing I would say in terms of some of the research grants, both successful and non-successful, that I've put in for working with colleagues in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly Kenya, is where most of my work has been. I'm lucky enough to work with a couple of quite strong women in Kenya and in other African countries as well. But when it comes to people taking the lead in roles on the grant, it does seem to be the men that are stepping up to do it. For example, when we were looking for a male early career researcher to take a lead role in a project, it was a man's name that was put forward. I think he's an excellent man, and I've got nothing against him, but there weren't any women in that role to take over that particular responsibility on the project. And I'm just thinking about the current British Academy grant that I've got at the moment, and the Kenyan lead in that particular grant, the impetus for the whole project, actually, and he drove me to apply and lead the application, is a male by Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research at the university, and has been very supportive and very engaged, which is lovely to see. But the two other collaborators on that grant are women, and the way that I've navigated the power relations in that grant are particularly to deal with the women at the university, in terms of going to them, asking them for their decisions, and not by any means undermining him, but making sure that they have a strong role, and that strong role in the project within their institution is recognised.
Well, thank you very much. For me, I think my experience is similar to hers. I came in as an early career woman, and I've been mentored by men. All along, opportunities that I've had have been opened up for me by men. My supervisors for my PhD were men, and also grants, fellowship, whatever is it that I've got, I got through these people. I think women tend to have this, is it the queen bee syndrome you were talking about? And there's always this underlying, I was discussing with my colleagues this morning, there's this underlying fear, I think, by women of not wanting to share resources with the junior ones. So we learned about it. There are about 3 of us who saw it when we were growing up, and we made up our minds that we are not going to be like that. And I think so far I've been able to succeed. I've never had anything given to me by a woman. I'm sorry. Or even led. Yeah. Thank you.
Might be also thinking too in terms of a generation as well. I mean, if can definitely turn it to the rest of the participants here for junior researchers or early career researchers, how their experience has been as well. Because I think there's a potentially definitely some difference in how early career researchers are supported when we were starting, and perhaps when the people we're supporting are going forth. I think. So that's something we'll come back to in just a minute. But to continue with the questions, the next one was about action, which is about what concrete policies or initiatives have proven most effective in increasing women's representation in research leadership within your context. So that's specific policies that you've encountered or maybe helped promote.
In my universities, the policies and initiatives that have been of use include the mentorship and networking opportunities, which I said started, not too long ago, with people being really committed in mentoring other female members of academics. Then my university is also interested in, or has also put in place, recognition and visibility of female leaders. That is even a big thing in my university, and it has been of serious help to the university. However, there is one that the university does not use, and that is the inclusive recruitment process. There is nothing like, if you're a female, you have more chances now. You compete on the same level, promotion, recruitment, whatever it is. There's no gender. What? No. Which is okay, because now this is a joke. Otherwise, men will feel that we got what we got because we are females, right? So it's okay. Then the university, recently we got this gender mainstreaming office. I think it came into being about 2-3 years ago. However, prior to that, there's been the subtle changes in gender issues in my university, and we've really had 2 female registrars back to back, which wasn't part, the way it was. And then we have female deputy vice chancellors. We've been having a lot of female deputy vice chancellors, but we've never had a female vice chancellor. And on the issue of deanship, because I saw it's on the issue of deanship, the way deans are appointed in my university, it's a matter of either seniority or the electoral process. So it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. In my faculty, for example, we use seniority. It's only when the most senior person says, "Oh, I'm not interested," that they go to the next person. So we have a lot of female deans in the University of Ibadan.
So similarly, one of the very early initiatives that I got involved in when I came to Glasgow was the College of Social Sciences and Arts and Humanities launched a joint women's mentoring network. And that was my first real experience of mentorship outside my close team of women. And that was really, really valuable for me. And I think for a lot of other women in the College of Social Science and Arts and Humanities, getting to know somebody who actually was embedded within the university, because my mentors were actually quite new to the university, and finding out how she had moved through. And she was a professor of arts, Greek. I can't quite remember, but very, very different. And that was really good. But I think, the mentoring, role models, having visible female role models that people can look at and go, right, well, I could get there. I can be similar to them, I think is really, really important. One of the initiatives that I've been involved in since 2012, very, very actively for quite a long time, less actively now, is the Athena Swan initiative in the UK, which has its drawbacks, has its flaws, but actually one of the things that it really, really does is make people and schools and leadership teams reflect on their gender, their approach to gender, work-life balance, part-time working, flexible working. And I think what we've seen, particularly in the School of Health and Wellbeing, where I chaired the Athena Swan group, our self-assessment team for quite a number of years, was a real reflection on how we all work together, which actually made the place a really good environment for people to work with, regardless of whether they were male or whether they were female. But there were a lot of initiatives there around work-life balance, around leadership and engagement. But one of the things that it never solved in the School of Health and Wellbeing, and I think it's a really, really important thing, is women stepping up for roles. Now, women tend to do roles that men don't. So our Athena Swan team was mainly women. A lot of the pastoral roles, the outreach roles, the roles that actually perhaps are less important when it comes to leadership, women do those and men do not. And I think it's really important as women that we look after ourselves and think before we take on. We like to do things because people ask us and we want to do them. But think, actually, I'm the most important person here. How does it benefit me? Because I think you'll find that quite often that's what men are doing before they step up and say yes. I think sometimes we step up and say yes a bit too quickly.
Just to quickly add to that, I think I found very useful, not really a policy, but the opportunities that Glasgow has provided for women leadership training workshops. So I was part of the Aurora Women in Higher Education series of seminars and network now that lives on. So it's quite similar to the one that you're trying to build in terms of having a range of sessions, talking about the challenges of academia and trying to build you up as a female leader. So I thought that was very useful. And just a comment about, for me, it's not about the policy, it's about the accountability and the transparency of the policy as well, in terms of how can you ensure that your policies aren't subverted to politics or subverted by the queen bees. It's to have transparent and open policies so that you can hold people to account if things seem to be, not above board, if you like. And so one of the other issues is also to test through, I think the Athena Swan is great, and I was going to mention it, so thanks, Cindy, for mentioning already. But I think a lot of the test for these policies is whether it engages with intersectionality issues. It's not about gender, it's also about race and ethnicity, it's about nationality, it's about where you're from. Are certain groups of women being left behind with these policies? So it's also about ensuring intersectionality issues are engaged with as well.
The last two questions, and I think I'll just open up to however you want to answer, is thinking about how research institutions can move from gender awareness to structural reform and what that kind of looks like. And then the other question is, what does mentorship or sponsorship, what role does it play in closing the gender gap, and how can we institutionalize these mechanisms and make them, I guess, part of the systems change? So I'll let you answer whichever component of that you want to tackle, and then we can have final comments from the.
I think I would want to talk about mentorship and sponsorship. Mentorship is trying to encourage somebody who is junior to you, showing them the ropes, while sponsorship is opening the door for somebody and they show and also trying to make them visible. You know, when you get an opportunity, you ask them to apply and all that, and then you forward their names for certain assignments. And that is very important because for most of us, when we are just junior academia, it's a lot of struggle. And we need somebody to help us. We need, whether they are our helpers are men or women, doesn't matter. We need somebody to help us. So that is one of the things that should actually be done formally in the institutions. We don't have that kind of formal thing. You know, it's a matter of, oh, this professor likes you and sees you as hardworking, then they bring you up to themselves and then they show you the ropes. So I think there's a need for that. There's something I think I need to talk about so that you understand the difference in the context of the African. I'll try to be quick about it. For the African woman in academia, let me tell you what happens. She's the carer. Women are usually carers, right? She's the carer. She has a job. She has to take care of her children. And when you get to a certain stage, you're also taking care of your parents. They probably will move to your house. And when you have a job, remember, you and your husband will come in later in the day. The man will be in the sitting room watching movies or listening to the news while you go straight to the kitchen. And then in the evening, you are expected to do your wifely duties. So it becomes so, and like Dr. Adekola said the other time, you have to choose. I've had to choose some grants, some fellowships. Can I afford to take this on while having young children? And I said no. I was telling my friend, there's nothing like a grant is due at a particular time. Can I take it up with my roles at home? If I cannot, I will just leave it. And that, I can assure you, has affected a lot of women. Thank you.
So I'll just be very, very quick. So in terms of mentorship, I think that's hugely invaluable, and it's absolutely seeing it from a mentor and from a mentee, putting the mentee at the center and being independent in the advice that you give her is really, really important, both in terms of their professional life, but also how that balances out with their private life as well. But I would say sort of structurally, and going back to something that you said at the beginning about one quick, easy change is to make recruitment materials more equitable for gender. So thinking about the language that you use when you're advertising a job, and also any policies that your institution does have, whether it be mentoring is available, not necessarily for women, but mentoring is something. So it's these things that women might value and see on an advert and think, actually, this is for me. I think that's a really easy win.
And again, just a quick comment from me. I was just reflecting on the types of mentorship that you can get. And I've had many types of mentorship in terms of mentorship to be a leader, mentorship to navigate through sometimes toxic academic waters, right? Mentorship in terms of your life, your work-life balance, life mentorship. And I've had all three of them and not necessarily from the same person. So there's also needs to be flexibility in the types of mentorship that you need at certain points in your life. That sounds a bit obvious, but for me, it's not just having one single academic mentor, but acknowledging that you do have a life beyond academia, and sometimes you need a bit of support in terms of navigating that balance.
Cool. Thank you all. I think we need to wrap it up, but I just wanted to add really quickly, when looking at some of the statistics from this university, I was looking at full-time work versus part-time work. And it is, for people who work full-time, it's about 50-50 in terms of gender balance. But for part-time, it is about 65% women who do the part-time work. I would hazard to say it's in part because of caring responsibilities, both for children and for parents. And I don't think that, despite the fact that we have a lot more gender balance in many things, those caring responsibilities still tend to fall on women. So I think that's something to reflect on. And just in terms of some of the things to reflect on from what everybody said, networking, mentoring, visibility of women in their institutions, I think came up quite a few times. Transparent policies, and demanding those transparent policies, I think, is something that came up quite a few times. And thinking of female leadership in terms of queen bee syndromes that some women encounter, but also knowing that something that Cindy said, where thinking about protecting yourself, but also not to the point of, I think, not doing those roles that women tend to step up to, but encouraging men to step up to those roles and not having to abdicate or become more male, if you will, or more masculine in terms of how we do our jobs and work and thinking about those things. So
Do you want to do Q&A and just
yeah, if there's any questions or comments from what you've heard on the panel, I'll be happy to pass you the mic.
I think it's important that we think about the difference between a strong woman and a sort of feminist or an intersectional approach, and thinking about the qualities and values of whether it's care or relationality or embodied awareness of emotion, these sorts of things that aren't the domain of woman, but it's an approach that is important to relate closely to epistemic justice rather than a fixed identity gender. Because as you say, we could all, put on a suit and go around and stomp around the university like the majority do, but that's really not anybody's intention. So I think it's important to untangle what we mean by epistemic justice and men and women.
Thank you, Mia. That's a great comment. And there's 2 comments right here. Hopefully we can.
Thank you. Mine is a question really to everybody, but to the founders especially. First of all, congratulations on this mammoth piece of work that you've taken on. I think it's an amazing opportunity for many of us. I have lived in Scotland 17 years, in the UK 27. I'm originally from Uganda, so I see this as a great opportunity. But the question I have, so a lot of what's been spoken about, and my research is here in the Adam Smith Business School. And just to comment on the women experiences, I have definitely experienced the queen bee situations, but I'm one of the very few that are absolutely blessed to have an amazing experience in my PhD research. My supervisor is here, and I'm not saying it because she's here. She really is one of the most amazing women, Kat Riak. So I want to acknowledge that. I know she will be embarrassed, but yeah, she needs a bit of embarrassment. But I have had, and I've said it in very many spaces, that has meant a lot to me because I come from practice, and it's a different environment. I work within anti-racism, and my research is focused on decolonization as well. So the question I have, a lot of what's been discussed here has a very heavy emphasis, and perhaps that's really important for the network. I think it is, because there is a space and a place for that, and I think it's important that we have that individual support mechanism, which is really important, that we have the mentorship, the sponsorship, and all that. And I think it's important. I benefited from it. I still continue to benefit from it. My question, though, is the things that we are talking about, they are not just our issues. They're issues that are part of the patriarchal system that we are part of. They're issues that are part of the colonial issues that we all experience. They're issues that come from the structural elements. When we talk about funding funding usually is a result of policy which looks at numbers. And usually those numbers will be skewed because perhaps the research hasn't quite done that. I'm going to ask in like 2 seconds, but I just wanted to set the context of the question I'm asking, which is around, we need to look at the structures as well. So my question is, to what extent are you going to be looking at the structures, the systems, the patriarchal and the emphasis that is on, we fund this because this is how it works. Our policy works like that, and therefore that is why we are going to work like that. Because at that point, then we have certain changes, which also includes inviting men to the spaces. So my question is, how are you intending to put an emphasis on that too?
I'm not sure. Is the question for me? Okay. I mean, the structural issues you're talking about, the network is just starting. So we've not had time to dig into how we might be able to approach structural issues. But maybe the conversation will pick tomorrow, because we'll continue our meeting tomorrow to have a conversation on how we might be able to address some of the structural issues. We did apply for funding to maybe do some work around the Vice Chancellor program in Nigeria to start with. We didn't get funded. And those are some of the things to address them. But I think our conversation tomorrow will help us to unpick some of the things we want to do immediately, especially without funding that is possible. So we get to that conversation, and hopefully we can feed back through our communication channel. I think we have one last question.
One observation I've made personally is the fact that, and this is me being very honest, I've gotten more favors objectively from men than women. And it is very sad, because personally, I feel like women should relate more and should be more willing to help you. But unfortunately, my case is different. I've been helped by a few women, but if I'm going to say realistically, the majority of help I've gotten so far has been from men. And I'm a final year PhD student here at the University of Glasgow. And every day, I thank God for the fact that all my 3 supervisors are men, which is not ideally meant to be so. But that is my reality. Straight to my question, should we as women resign to the fact that one way or the other, at a particular point in our career, we are going to be stagnant? We cannot be promoted the same way the men are, maybe due to childbirth or some other reasons? Or is it possible that we can grow in our career the same way men grow in their careers? Or should we just accept that men will always be ahead of us professionally? Thank you.
Yeah, no, we absolutely should not accept that we won't be promoted in the same way that men will do. But what I think we need to do, and what I see time and time again in recruitment and in mentoring people for promotion, is that men tend to put themselves forward much more readily than women. And this is a broad generalization, but we do tend to be reticent and self-critical. And I'm sure men do the same, but actually they seem to overcome it a lot better than we do. And I've got quite a number of examples of recruiting men who talk beautifully in an interview, but actually, if you appoint a woman, they can do the job much, much better. Yeah. And I've seen male colleagues overtake women colleagues, but that's nothing to do with their aptitude. Mm-hmm. It's to do with the fact that they have dared to go for promotion first, and they've resisted advice saying that they shouldn't go for promotion. They have gone, they've done a good application, they've got it. Whereas women will go, oh, well, no, I don't think I'm ready, despite the fact that people are telling them that they are. So I think we just need to believe in ourselves more, would be my message.
To add to that really quickly, if you look at the numbers of grade 10 and that sort of professor level promotions at this university, the gender parity goes down quite a bit. It goes from like 47% down to 35%. And I think it's for those very reasons. And so No, I would say. But also going back to what Mia said, and I'll just conclude on this, the idea of epistemic injustice and what both what we should be thinking about in terms of what more equitable workplaces look like, right? Maybe not doesn't come from patriarchal norms. It might come from other places, and I think that's the same for working across sort of the north-south divide as well, which is what is actually promoted as sort of African epistemologies and what is Western or European, and where can we break those down in terms of going past sort of the colonial framework that we're still sort of tethered to. And I think that's also important to think about too in terms of gender, where gender is not just about men and women and those social categories, but we have gender nonconforming categories as well, and those exist all over the world, whether we want to think of them or not, existing or not. And that in terms of sort of feminist, I work within sort of feminist theoretical grounds, is thinking about that in terms of what sort of ideas and what sort of actions to be inclusive of.
Thanks very much.